Burnout. It's a very real thing, and it's a very real risk for really motivated founders, particularly if you're building something great and it's scaling quickly, right? I've been there, I've worn that t-shirt, and I've learned the hard way why it's so important. And I was very interested recently by a study actually by Notion that created something called, I think it's the negative split study, and basically it was a big study on lots and lots of founders of growing businesses around founder endurance. And there were a couple of things that really stood out for me that won't be a surprise, right, but I think really put a nail in what I'm talking about. One was, I think, about 40% of founders in scale ups are working 60 plus hours a week really consistently, and 50%, that's half of them, have experienced real burnout, which is obviously perhaps not surprising, but is a worrying trend. And I spend a lot of time around really motivated founders, and I see it all the time. And part of a role of a good NED is to make sure that you spot it, and then you're building systems, processes, and awareness around that problem to ensure that it doesn't actually happen. Because you see, burnout is really interesting. When you start a business, you don't really experience burnout because it's kind of, this is really exciting, and that adrenaline pushes you on. You don't realize that it's wearing, but eventually it catches up with you. But when there's that excitement, it doesn't really equal burnout. But then somewhere along the way, basically, that it kind of moves from this is exciting to actually this is relentless. And it's in that change, that switch where burnout often happens, kind of in the middle of the race almost, not at the beginning. And it's looking out for that and recognizing it, because that is where the founder's role needs to change, and often really considerably. We talk a lot about, sticking to your zone of genius and working on the stuff that you're best at. And it's really important to start delegating as quickly as you can once you feel like the company can afford to ensure and to employ really good people. And so it's about moving from sort of, deliberate choice to kind of doing and then designing things, basically. So, you want to make sure that you're thinking about very deliberately going from, right, we're just doing stuff and we're going to get this done and we're going to ship it as quickly as we possibly can, to actually designing systems to be able to do that at scale. And of course, that kind of heroic effort to durable system kind of move, which is, something that people talk about, is really all about two things. Firstly, it's about people, employing people much better than you think you need as soon as you possibly can. And then, that have done it before and have the experience, and then allowing them to design the process, and you creating kind of structures above them to measure their KPIs and their outputs. So it's really about thinking to yourself, the key question here is, if you think you might be in this, is like, what needs to change so it doesn't all depend on me? That is the key question. And once you've got that list, and this is what we often work on, is creating that list, and then, prioritizing that list, and then working one by one through them, knocking each domino down in order to be able to then ensure that you can build a durable system. So hopefully that's helpful. As I say, I see it a lot. I've experienced it myself, so it's definitely something to be aware of.